Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. Imagine you're the guy who keeps the whole neighborhood's roads drivable, and the HOA president tells you your snowplow trucks aren't allowed inside the neighborhood, not parked inside. I laughed until he put it in writing. So I followed his rule to the letter. Then the biggest storm of the season hit. Guess who called first? Let me start with some background. I've been running my own landscaping and snow removal business for about 8 years now. Started small with just a pickup truck and a plow attachment, but it's grown into something I'm really proud of. We handle commercial properties, residential driveways, and have contracts with several neighborhoods in the area. The business has been good to me. Good enough that I was able to buy a house in one of the nicer developments around here. The neighborhood I live in is called Willowbrook Estates. It's one of those gated communities with an HOA that likes to keep everything looking perfect. Manicured lawns, matching mailboxes, the whole deal. When I moved in 3 years ago, I made sure to read through all the covenants and restrictions. There was the usual stuff about keeping your grass a certain height, no boats or RVs in driveways, paint colors need approval, that sort of thing. Nothing that seemed like it would be a problem for me. Here's where it gets interesting, though. My company, Rocky Mountain Snow Services, actually holds the contract for snow removal in Willowbrook Estates. The HOA hired us 2 winters ago after their previous company did such a terrible job that residents were literally getting stuck in their own driveways. We've been doing great work for them, always getting the roads cleared within hours of snowfall stopping, keeping the main entrance and community areas spotless. Now I drive a company truck. It's a 2019 Ford F-250 crew cab with our company logo on the doors. Nothing flashy, just professional lettering that says Rocky Mountain Snow Services with our phone number. During the summer months, I usually drive my personal car to and from work since the truck stays at our equipment yard most of the time. But during snow season, which runs from November through March around here, I sometimes bring the truck home. The reason is pretty simple. When there's snow in the forecast, I need to be ready to roll at 4 a.m. to get routes started before people head to work. It's a lot more efficient to have the truck at my house rather than driving to the yard first, especially when we're dealing with back-to-back storms. I park it in my driveway, not on the street, and it's never caused any issues. The truck is always clean, well-maintained, and honestly looks better than some of the personal vehicles I see around the neighborhood. This worked fine for 2 full winters. No complaints, no problems, nothing. The HOA was happy with our snow removal service. Neighbors would actually thank me when they saw me around for keeping everything so clear. I thought I had a good thing going. Then this past fall, everything changed. We got a new HOA president. The guy's name is Kevin, and I swear he must have been waiting his whole life for a chance to have some authority over other people. He got elected by promising to restore order and property values to the neighborhood, whatever that meant. From day one, he started sending out these long emails about violations and enforcement actions. People were getting fined for having their garbage cans visible from the street for more than 12 hours, for planting flowers that weren't on the approved list, for having Halloween decorations up 2 days past November 1st. I should have seen it coming, but I figured since we had the snow removal contract and I'd never had any issues before, I'd be fine. Wrong. The first notice showed up on a Tuesday morning in late November. I'd brought the truck home the night before because we had snow expected Wednesday morning. I found this official-looking letter stuck to my front door. Violation notice. Commercial vehicle violation. Article 7, Section 3 of the Willowbrook Estates Covenant states that no commercial vehicles may be parked or stored within the community at any time. You have 48 hours to remove the vehicle or face fines. Contact the HOA office immediately to discuss compliance. I was honestly confused at first. I'd been parking the truck here for 2 years without any issues. I called the HOA office and asked to speak with Kevin. "This is about your truck," he said when I explained who I was. "It's gotta go. Commercial vehicles aren't allowed in the neighborhood." I tried to explain the situation. "Look, I understand the concern about commercial vehicles, but the truck is only here during snow season when there's weather expected. It's for my landscaping business." "I don't care what kind of business it is. Commercial vehicles aren't allowed." "But my company actually does the snow removal for this neighborhood. We're Rocky Mountain Snow Services. We're the ones who keep your roads clear." He was quiet for a moment. "What do you mean, your company?" "I mean, I own Rocky Mountain Snow Services, the company that has the contract with the HOA. His face must have gone through several expressions on the other end of the phone because there was a long pause before he spoke again. When he did, his voice had gotten even more stubborn. "Well, that doesn't change anything. Rules are rules, and I was elected to enforce them. You signed the same covenants as everyone else when you bought your house. Don't you think there should be some consideration for the fact that the neighborhood actually benefits from having the snow removal contractor nearby during storms? The covenants don't have exceptions for residents who own businesses. You've got 48 hours. I was pretty frustrated, but I figured maybe I could work with this guy if I talked to him face to face. Maybe if he really understood the practical benefits, he'd be more reasonable. That Saturday, I walked over to his house. It's one of the bigger ones in the neighborhood, corner lot with a circular driveway. Kevin answered the door and immediately got defensive when he saw me. If you're here about that truck, my position hasn't changed. I just wanted to have a conversation about this. I think there might be some misunderstanding about how the snow removal service works. He crossed his arms and stayed in his doorway, clearly not planning to invite me in. What's to misunderstand? You have a commercial vehicle. Commercial vehicles aren't allowed. It's pretty simple. I tried a different approach. When we get a big storm, especially overnight storms, response time is critical. Having the truck here means I can start clearing roads by 4 a.m. instead of 6 a.m. That's the difference between people getting to work on time and everyone being stuck. That's your business problem to solve. Figure out your logistics without breaking HOA rules. But the neighborhood benefits from faster response times. Isn't that worth considering? Listen, he said, stepping closer. I don't care if you're the most important contractor in the state. Rules are rules, and I was elected to enforce them. That truck moves, or you get fined. End of discussion. And that was it. He shut the door in my face. I went home and called our office manager to pull out my copy of the covenants. I spent the evening reading through the whole thing carefully. Sure enough, there it was in Article 7, Section 3. No commercial vehicles, trucks, trailers, or equipment may be parked or stored on any residential lot within Willowbrook Estates at any time. The language was pretty clear. I had to admit that technically my truck probably did violate the covenant. But I also noticed that the same document had a section about snow removal being the responsibility of the HOA, and how they would contract with qualified professionals to maintain safe driving conditions throughout the winter months. I figured I had two options: fight this thing, or just comply and park the truck at our yard during snow season. Fighting it would probably mean getting lawyers involved, dealing with HOA meetings, all kinds of hassle. Plus, there was a chance I could lose and end up paying legal fees on top of fines, so I decided to comply. I moved the truck back to our equipment yard and started driving my personal car to work even during snow season. I figured that would be the end of it, but Kevin wasn't done with me yet. 2 weeks later, I got another letter. This one was on official HOA letterhead and looked like Kevin had spent some time crafting it. Notice of expanded commercial vehicle restriction. It has come to the attention of the HOA board that multiple commercial vehicles associated with Rocky Mountain Snow Services have been observed entering and operating within Willowbrook Estates. Effective immediately, all commercial vehicles bearing Rocky Mountain Snow Services markings or identification are prohibited from entering community property at any time for any reason. This includes but is not limited to maintenance activities, service calls, or any other business-related operations. Violation of this restriction will result in immediate towing at owner's expense and further legal action. I read the letter 3 times before it really sunk in. This wasn't just about me parking the truck at my house anymore. Kevin was trying to ban my company's vehicles from the entire neighborhood. I called the HOA office again. This time Kevin's tone was even more hostile. I thought I made myself clear about this commercial vehicle situation. You did, and I moved the truck. It hasn't been parked at my house in 2 weeks. That's not enough. I've been doing some research, and apparently your company has multiple trucks coming and going from this neighborhood for snow removal. That needs to stop immediately. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Those trucks are here because the HOA has a contract with my company for snow removal services. They're doing the job that the neighborhood is paying us to do. Find another way to do it, use unmarked vehicles, or subcontract to someone else. I don't care how you solve the problem, but I'm not having a parade of commercial trucks driving through this neighborhood anymore. That's completely unreasonable. How are we supposed to plow snow without snow plows? Not my problem. You've got until the next snowfall to figure it out. At this point, I was getting pretty angry, but I tried to stay professional. Kevin, I think you're misunderstanding the situation. The HOA board signed a contract with Rocky Mountain Snow Services. I can't just change the terms of that contract because you don't like seeing our trucks. Actually, I've been looking into that contract too. The contract comes up for renewal next fall. Don't expect it to be renewed. You're going to fire us because you don't like the fact that I live in the neighborhood? I'm going to fire you because your company can't comply with basic community standards. That's when I realized this guy wasn't going to be reasonable about anything. He'd decided he didn't like me, and he was going to use his HOA position to make my life difficult regardless of what made sense for the community. I hung up the phone and sat in my kitchen for a while trying to figure out what to do. The contract with Willowbrook Estates was a good chunk of our winter business. Losing it would hurt, but it wouldn't put us under. On the other hand, the principle of the thing really bothered me. This guy was basically trying to force me out of my own neighborhood because he didn't like my job. Then I had an idea. If Kevin wanted to play hardball with the rules, maybe I should give him exactly what he was asking for. He wanted my commercial vehicles banned from the neighborhood? Fine, I'd ban them. I called our office and told them to draft a letter to the HOA. The letter was very simple and professional. In response to your official notice dated date, Rocky Mountain Snow Services acknowledges that our commercial vehicles are prohibited from Willowbrook Estates property effective immediately. We will comply fully with this directive. Please be advised that this prohibition makes it impossible for us to fulfill our current snow removal contract with the community. We consider this a breach of contract by the HOA and will be suspending all snow removal services until the prohibition is lifted or alternative arrangements can be made that allow our equipment access to the property. I sent copies to Kevin, the HOA management company, and the other board members that I could find contact information for. Kevin called me about an hour after the letter was delivered. "What the hell do you think you're doing? I'm complying with your prohibition on commercial vehicles, just like you demanded. You can't just stop providing snow removal service. You have a contract." "I sure do, but that contract requires my trucks to access the neighborhood property to perform snow removal. Since you've prohibited my trucks from the property, I can't fulfill the contract. Seems like you created this problem." There was a long pause. "This is ridiculous." "Obviously, the prohibition doesn't apply to contracted services." "That's not what your official letter says. It says all commercial vehicles associated with Rocky Mountain Snow Services are prohibited from entering community property at any time, for any reason. It specifically mentions service calls. Snow removal is a service call. You know damn well what I meant." "Actually, I don't. The letter was pretty specific. No commercial vehicles, period. I'm just following the HOA rules, which I thought was important to you." He was quiet for a moment, and I could practically hear him grinding his teeth. "Fine. Consider the restriction modified to exclude contracted snow removal services. I'm going to need that in writing. An official retraction from the HOA board. Can't be too careful about following the rules properly." "This is bullcrap, and you know it." "I'm just trying to be compliant with HOA regulations, Kevin." "Isn't that what you wanted?" He hung up on me. For the next few days, everything was quiet. I figured maybe Kevin would swallow his pride and send a retraction letter that would let us get back to work. The weather forecast was looking pretty ominous. A major storm system was heading our way, possibly the biggest of the season so far, but no letter came. On Wednesday morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing with weather alerts. The storm had intensified overnight and was now expected to dump between 18 and 24 inches of snow starting that evening and continuing through Friday morning. This was going to be a monster. I spent the day getting our equipment ready and coordinating with our crews for all our other properties. Willowbrook Estates wasn't our only contract, and we had a lot of work to prepare for. I did feel a little bad about the situation, but Kevin had made his position crystal clear. He wanted HOA rules enforced regardless of practical consequences, so that's exactly what he was going to get. Thursday morning, I woke up to a winter wonderland. It was still snowing hard and had to be at least 15 inches on the ground already, with more falling steadily. My phone was ringing off the hook with our other clients wanting updates on when we'd get to them. We had our crews out working since 3 a.m. and everything was going according to plan for our other contracts. Except for Willowbrook Estates. Around 10 a.m., my office manager called me. I've got the HOA management company on the other line asking where our trucks are for Willowbrook. They said residents are calling the office complaining that they can't get out of their driveways. Tell them to refer to our letter from last week. Our vehicles are prohibited from the property. Are you sure about this? They sound pretty desperate. I looked out my window at my own driveway, which was completely blocked with snow. I was stuck just like everyone else in the neighborhood. "Yeah, I'm sure. We're just following HOA rules." An hour later, Kevin called me directly. His tone was completely different from our previous conversations. "We need your trucks here now. People can't get out to go to work." "I'd love to help, but our commercial vehicles are prohibited from the neighborhood, remember? Come on, you're being ridiculous." "This is an emergency. I understand it's an emergency, but I can't violate the HOA's prohibition. You were pretty clear that there could be legal action if my vehicles entered the property. I'll lift the prohibition right now over the phone." "That's not how official HOA policies work, Kevin. I need something in writing from the board. I'm not risking getting my company in legal trouble." "This is insane. People are snowed in." "I know, I'm snowed in too. My own driveway is completely blocked." "Then send your crews to clear it." "Can't do it. Commercial vehicles are prohibited, remember?" The call ended with Kevin making some pretty creative threats about what he was going to do to me, none of which sounded particularly professional or legal. By Thursday afternoon, the situation in the neighborhood was getting pretty dire. The snow had stopped falling, but we had gotten 22 inches total. Nobody could get out of their driveways. The main roads through the neighborhood were completely impassable. I could see neighbors outside trying to shovel their driveways by hand, but it was hopeless. 22 inches of snow is way too much to handle with a shovel, especially the heavy, wet snow we'd gotten. My phone kept ringing with calls from the HOA management company, individual board members, and even some neighbors who'd gotten my number somehow. Everyone wanted to know when the snow removal crew was coming. I gave them all the same answer. Our vehicles were prohibited from the property, and we couldn't provide service until we received written authorization from the HOA board lifting the prohibition. From my window, I could see the situation getting worse throughout the day. Neighbors were trying to dig out by hand, but making very little progress. A few people with small snowblowers were working on their driveways, but even those were struggling with the depth and weight of the snow. The neighborhood looked like a disaster zone. Friday morning, I got a call from someone I didn't recognize. "This is Janet. I'm the HOA secretary. Kevin asked me to call you about the snow removal situation. Has the prohibition on our commercial vehicles been lifted in writing?" "Well, no, but Kevin said he told you it was okay to bring your trucks in and clear the snow. I'm sorry, but I can't accept verbal authorization for something that was prohibited in an official HOA notice. If the board wants us to resume service, I need written confirmation that our vehicles are allowed back on the property." "Can't you just make an exception? This is an emergency situation." "I wish I could, but the original prohibition was very specific about legal action if we violated it. I can't put my company at risk." Janet sounded like she was about to cry. "People have been stuck in their houses for 2 days. Some folks are running out of groceries and nobody can get to work. The mail carriers can't even get through the neighborhood roads." That actually made me feel pretty bad. I hadn't thought about people running out of necessities or being unable to work. But at the same time, this was exactly the kind of thing Kevin should have considered before he decided to play games with essential services. "I understand how difficult this situation is," I told Janet. But Kevin made it very clear that HOA rules were more important than practical considerations. "I'm just following the rules he set. Is there anything we can do to fix this quickly?" "The board could vote to officially retract the prohibition on our vehicles. That would need to be in writing and signed by board members. Or you could hire a different snow removal company." "How long would it take to get another company here?" "In this kind of emergency situation with this much snow, you're probably looking at several days minimum, assuming you can even find someone available. And it's going to cost a lot more than your regular contract rates." Friday afternoon, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize with an area code from 2 states over. "Is this Rocky Mountain Snow Services?" "Yes, who's this?" "This is Dave from Mountain View Snow Removal. I got a call from some HOA asking if we could do emergency snow removal for a neighborhood called Willowbrook Estates. They said it was urgent and they'd pay emergency rates." I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. "How much are emergency rates for that kind of job?" "For this situation, short notice, 20+ inches, full neighborhood clearing with out-of-state crews, I'd have to charge at least 5 times my normal rate, maybe more, plus travel costs and overtime for the crews since I'd have to bring equipment from out of state. Probably looking at $8,000 or $9,000 minimum for a job like that." "That sounds about right for emergency service." "Thing is, the lady I talked to said they already have a snow removal company, but there's some kind of dispute. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" I explained the situation to Dave, and he started laughing. "So let me get this straight. They banned your trucks from the neighborhood, and now they're surprised that you can't plow their snow? That's about the size of it." And they want me to come from 2 states away to do a job that their local contractor could handle in a few hours? Looks that way. Dave laughed even harder. Well, if they want to pay emergency rates for their own stupidity, I'm not going to argue. Thanks for the heads up, though. Saturday morning, Kevin called me again. This time he sounded completely desperate. How much would it cost to get your trucks here today? Are you lifting the prohibition? Just tell me how much. I thought about it for a moment. Well, at this point it would be emergency service. We'd have to pull crews off other scheduled jobs, pay overtime hours, deal with equipment that's been sitting unused for 3 days in the cold. I'd say 5 times our normal rate. 5 times? Are you out of your mind? That's the going rate for emergency snow removal. I actually talked to the company your management company called yesterday. They quoted similar pricing. This is extortion. No, this is what happens when you interfere with contracted services during an emergency. You wanted to enforce HOA rules regardless of practical consequences, so now you get to deal with those consequences. Fine. We'll pay it. Just get your trucks here now. I'll still need the prohibition lifted in writing first. Same terms as before. Kevin made a sound like a growling animal and hung up. By Saturday afternoon, I could see Dave's crew starting to work in the neighborhood. They had brought trucks and equipment from out of state, just like he said. It looked like they had a full crew of 6 guys working, and they were making decent progress on the main roads. It was also clearly costing the HOA a fortune. I could see multiple trucks and specialized equipment that had to be trucked in for this one job. The out-of-state crew worked through Saturday and most of Sunday. They did a decent job on the main roads and managed to clear most of the driveways, but you could tell it wasn't done by people who knew the neighborhood layout. They'd missed a few smaller cul-de-sacs entirely and hadn't done the usual detail work around mailboxes and fire hydrants that we normally handled. There were also huge piles of snow pushed into random places that were going to be problems when everything started to melt. Saturday evening, I finally got an email from Janet with official retraction in the subject line. The Willowbrook Estates HOA Board hereby officially retracts and withdraws the commercial vehicle prohibition issued on date. Rocky Mountain Snow Services vehicles are authorized to resume normal operations within Willowbrook Estates immediately. This retraction is effective upon receipt and supersedes all previous restrictions. It was signed by 3 board members, including Janet, but notably not by Kevin. Sunday morning, I forwarded the retraction to our crew leader and told him to get started on cleanup work. Even though the out-of-state crew had done the main work, there was still a lot of detail cleanup that needed to be handled to get everything back up to our normal standards. Our crew spent most of Sunday fixing the mess and getting everything back to the way it should look. We cleared the missed areas, moved snow piles that were blocking fire hydrants, and made sure all the drainage areas were clear for when the snow started melting. Monday morning, I got a call from Janet. I wanted to thank you for getting everything cleaned up yesterday. It looks much better now. Just doing our job. I also wanted to apologize for this whole situation. The board met yesterday evening and we voted to remove Kevin as president. That was very interesting news. Really? The emergency snow removal cost us over $8,000. Plus, we've got residents who missed work, couldn't get groceries, and several people are talking about how this affected property values. Kevin's position was that it was worth it to maintain community standards, but the rest of us felt like he'd completely lost perspective on what's actually important for the community. What's going to happen with our snow removal contract? Well, that's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. Your contract runs through the end of March, and we'd definitely like to discuss renewing it for next year. Would you be interested? I thought about it for a moment. On one hand, Kevin was apparently out as president, so maybe things would go back to normal. On the other hand, I'd learned something important about how quickly things could go sideways with HOA politics. I'd be open to discussing it, I told Janet, but I'd want some modifications to protect against this kind of situation happening again. What kind of modifications? A clause that specifically allows company vehicles to park at my residence during active snow events, and language that prevents the HOA from interfering with contracted services without board approval. That seems very reasonable. Kevin was difficult to work with about a lot of things. The rest of the board is more focused on practical solutions that actually benefit the community. We ended up renewing the contract for the following year with the modifications I wanted. Kevin moved out of the neighborhood about 6 months later. Apparently, he'd made himself pretty unpopular with his enforcement crusade and decided he'd be happier somewhere else. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Someone's spouse has cancer. This person has taken all the right steps. They've contacted all the right doctors, set up all the right appointments, all their finances are squared away. They even have health insurance for times like this. There's just one problem. Their spouse's date of birth is incorrect on their health insurance policy. This is causing issues with doctor visits and making it difficult to obtain life-saving medication. They're crying themselves to sleep at night. They don't know if their lifelong partner is going to be alive next month. They're just hoping that someone, somewhere, can help provide the necessary treatment. They're asking for a miracle. However, as their insurance carrier, we're not allowed to make any changes to their policy. Why not? First, some background. I've been working in the soul-crushing industry of health insurance for a few years. It's as terrible as everyone makes it out to be. Everything is very compartmentalized. No one wants to take ownership and actually help people. One big problem is that our department only has employer-sponsored insurance. This means that your employer allows you to choose from different carriers such as Aetna, Blue Cross, or Cigna. After reviewing your options, you tell them, "I want Aetna." Now, your employer deducts money from your paycheck and automatically manages your Aetna account for you. Perfect, you might think. That stuff is too complicated anyway. I'm better off letting the professionals handle the paperwork for me. Indeed, it certainly feels like a load off, but there's also an issue with that. A lot of people don't care about you, and they don't care if you've been in agonizing pain for months or even years. They just know when it's their turn to take your call, there's another department they'll transfer you to, because they don't want to speak with you anymore. They don't want to hear you cry or see that their complacency is causing people so much pain. There's also another issue. If an employer has full permission to change your policy, then that limits my ability to make any changes for you. Imagine calling up your insurance and us saying, "I know that you have coverage with us, but I can't switch you to a family plan. You have to call your HR for that." I'm sure it sounds even dumber to the customer than it does to me. Can the employer and the insurance not simply talk to each other? Or better yet, maybe you've left your job for a new one. Maybe you've just enrolled into college. You need a letter showing that your old insurance is no longer active. You can't even get new insurance until you have that letter. Sorry, but our records show you're still active. We can't send a termination letter until the employer tells us. Pure insanity. Here's where it gets even crazier. There's one employer we deal with who has taken full control of member enrollment. We're not allowed to touch anything. Change of address? Sorry, call HR. In the meantime, we'll keep sending your protected health information to your old address. Spouse's date of birth is wrong, and you can't pick up medicine at the pharmacy? Tough luck, that one can take months to sort out. We can't change the information even if we want to. It completely locks us out of the database. The most difficult part is that this employer is notorious for delaying service, having extremely long hold times, and stonewalling its employees. Nothing we can do, they'll say. You have to call your health insurance because everything looks good on our end. This is a bald-faced lie, or just sheer incompetence on their end, because the employer has to send us the right information, but instead they're bouncing the member around just to avoid a few extra minutes of paperwork. Things got so bad and members were getting so mistreated, we were instructed to start escalating our calls so that members wouldn't have to be the middlemen between our enrollment department and their employer. But like I said, things are very compartmentalized even on my end. People don't want to take accountability. My higher-ups started saying, "Stop sending cases for us to work. You, the lowly service agent, must first contact the employer before we do." Cue malicious compliance. You want me to spend an hour listening to hold music instead of getting cussed out by people? Say no more, my friend. Customers were ecstatic when I told them that I would be happy to call their employer for them. It's a bit of a hold time, but you don't have to worry about that. I'll call them and I'll give them all the instructions they need to get this corrected. You don't have to worry about anything. We'll have everything sorted out by next week. Some customers would still voice their concerns. It's impossible to get an agent from my employer on the line. Their system tells you to call back later. I've been trying all afternoon. That's right. It would take hours just to dial their employer, followed by hours of holding, followed by months of delay. How could anyone with a conscience allow that type of stress to continue? Not to worry, I told them. I have an automated dialer that allows me to make a bunch of calls at once. I'll get into their queue within 5 minutes. I did this for a few months. I was able to successfully sort out hundreds of enrollment issues with this particular employer. My turnaround time for each member was only a couple days. Normally it would have taken months, or even years. But the process was completely streamlined, because I knew what to ask for, how to ask for it, and where to forward documentation. Members can't be expected to know these things. But when the member called us, we were able to get it taken care of. Essentially, I made it my mission to call this employer every waking moment. Normally, they needed verbal permission from the member to speak with me, but I got so familiar with their call flow that I figured out the exact phrasing that would get documentation sent over without involving the member. Agents started recognizing me on a first-name basis. When I called in, they knew they couldn't drag their feet anymore. "Oh, it's this guy again? All right, fine. Here's your paperwork." Their managers started putting in special notes that documentation could be shared. Members would call in very distressed about their enrollment situation, and I would explain that my new unofficial job title was calling this employer. We got birth dates changed, we got medications filled, we got policy letters sent. For a good chunk of time, people were getting taken care of. The fallout was just as wild. Rather than being congratulated for a job well done, or at the very least having people bow down at my feet the moment I walked into the office, the tone was much more idiotic. Instead, the higher-ups realized that my successful work was creating more work for them, because now they had to actually help people and process the right paperwork. "We don't want you calling this company anymore. That's not the right move. You have to stop immediately." "Sorry, boss, I forgot I'm just a paper pusher." "What do you want me to say when a member's spouse is needing chemo drugs and dying of cancer because we can't change their date of birth?" "Tell them to call their HR. You can transfer them in, but you can't dial a bunch of times and you can't speak to an agent for them." Got it. So, I have to throw them into the deep end. And here I thought I was doing something useful for people. My bad, it won't happen again. Spoiler, it did happen again, and my higher-ups got really mad. Luckily, it was a manager who instructed me to call the employer. I even asked, "Are you sure I'm allowed to do this?" They said yes and sent me that instruction in writing. Because of this, I didn't get in trouble for it, and once again, for a short time, people were able to get coverage with zero hiccups. Unfortunately, my company was foaming at the mouth and put a dead stop to it. Emails were sent to every agent in our company stating that no one was allowed to contact this employer under any circumstances. New call scripting was created specifically for this employer. If someone has an enrollment issue, tell them that this employer is not accepting new calls at this time. Oh, hey, now we're the ones telling the bald-faced lies. No, that employer never shut down their phone lines. It just takes a while to get through. But some corporate idiot thought it would be better for our metrics if we started lying to our members. Also, tell them that we're here for them every step of the way during this tough time. Cheap words that ended up deflating good results. If someone ever utters the words, "I'm here for you every step of the way," while avoiding all responsibility, you know they want nothing to do with you. They only like results when it means zero extra work for them. Anyway, thank you for watching.